Hello, good evening, comrades. Welcome to comrades and friends of Online Communist Forum. This weekly forum looks at topical political events nationally and internationally, and will be introduced by Jack Conrad from the Provisional Central Committee of the CPJB. It's a live session on different outlets, and Jack's introduction will last for up to an hour or so. I will then take questions and contributions from attendees. At the end of Jack's introduction, if you want to speak, you need to raise your hand because I need to make you into a panelist in order for you to speak and to make a contribution. And you may wish to keep your camera off if you want to. So after that, Jack, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to begin with Trump. I devoted vast bulk of my opening to the New Popular Front and the sort of background to the New Popular Front in the old Popular Front of the 30s, and just sort of sneaked in a bit of American politics at the very end. And I just thought that given its importance, not only to Americans, but to global politics, it would be a good idea to begin with US politics. To me, making the obvious point, to me at least, as I said, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump wasn't a setup by the Donald Trump camp. To me, any idea of that is an absurdity. I mean, imagine, for example, if somehow, their brilliant shot had aimed at Donald Trump's ear and a gust of wind had intervened.
Jack, can I just interrupt you? I'm sorry, your picture is freezing intermittently, and comrades are noticing this.
What do I do? Carry on?
Well, we can hear you clearly, but unfortunately, it's coming up that your Wi-Fi has got a very low width. So
okay, all I can do is
there you are. You're fine again now. But
all I can do is apologise. It's explain. Yeah, I can internet connection stable. This is that Virgin Media did warn me. I have to say. So, I'll carry on, Bob, as long as my sound is all right. I mean, from my angle, I can see me moving, and I can hear myself. So
we can hear you clearly. You're just intermittently freezing.
Okay, well, bear with the freezing image and go with the spoken mess, I think is the advice here. Okay, anyway, so I'm dismissing the idea that this was the Republican job, a Trump job. Also say that any suggestion, at least at the moment, that this was the US deep state, the Democrats, the Biden camp, I would dismiss that. If they want to get Trump, they would get Trump, they would kill Trump. They certainly wouldn't just shoot him in the ear, because in terms of how these things go, this has only provoked sympathy for Trump. As a natural TV performer, he knew instinctively what to do. He wasn't dying. And so although the secret agents, FBI and all the rest of it were jumping on top of him as per instructions, he had the gumption to leap up and put his fist in the air. And I suppose he came out with the right line about unity of the American population. Either way, you would gather that in terms of his popular standing, it would have gone up by a percentage or two, which matters in a tight election, even with the electoral college system in the United States indicating that Trump is the most likely winner. Okay, and talking about luck, it has to be said that in terms of Biden, things go against him. And after his disastrous performance in the debate with Donald Trump, it was ghastly watching it. I had to feel some human sympathy for him. But if you're a Democrat, you just must have been cringing throughout that absolutely dire performance. And then, if you couldn't make matters worse, he goes and catches COVID. And my understanding is, apart from, wasn't it the Guinness case? I don't know if anyone is old enough to remember the conviction of the directors of Guinness for fraud. As far as I know, very few people recover from dementia. It tends to be progressive, and if he was showing clear signs of dementia in the first debate, chances are that the signs of dementia will increase with the second debate that's scheduled with Trump in September, let alone appearances on the stump. So one would reckon, I think, pretty safely now that in a contest between Trump, he's the Republican candidate, and Biden, it's Trump that looks set to win. And therefore, we have to answer the question, why is not only Biden, why is he insistent on still running, but why do allies, including on the left, want Biden to run? First explanation that we're given, at least by the BBC and other such outlets, is that Biden is a stubborn man. Now, I don't know anything about Biden as an individual, but I simply go, you've followed Israel closer than I have. You've got correspondence in the United States. Okay, I buy it. He's a stubborn man. But there's more to it, surely, than individual whim. Because if you look at the Democrat Party, while we have, at least we're told, and I believe it, Obama, while we have Hillary Clinton, while we have 36 other lawmakers in the United States, all Democrats, hasten to add, urging him to step down, others are saying that he ought to run. And their calculation, I would guess, is based on opinion polls, but crucially, focus groups, and looking at the alternatives. And all we need to do is look at the standing, the popularity of the President Kamala Harris, and other potential presidential candidates such as Gavin Newsom, governor of California, let alone others that I just note them down: J.B. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, Jared Polis. I mean, okay, I'm not a student of American politics, but my guess would be that the great American public will be basically doing what I'm doing in terms of the mass of them going, who's that? And we need to emphasize that, of course, we've only got months to go before the actual presidential election takes place. So, yeah, maybe you can swing it around on a sixpence and, boost some candidate up in terms of public perception. But the chances are that they won't manage to do that. And we also ought to add that if you take Bernie Sanders and the so-called squad, they're also actually urging Biden to run. And I would suspect that in their case, what they are treating Biden as is the most pro-Labour Democratic president since whenever. Biden, yes, has supported strikes in terms of legislation. He's made some minor changes. He's introduced some sort of semi-Keynesian spending program to boost jobs and wages in the United States. So that's their excuse. Nonetheless, I have to say myself, again, hand on heart, I'm not a student of American politics. This is just a hunch. My guess is that sooner, and I suspect sooner rather than later, the voices in Biden's ear will become too great. In spite of his stubbornness, I would expect him to step down. He's physically frail, he's mentally frail, and that ain't gonna change. It's not a question of just dusting himself off and getting on with things. He's not in that situation. So I suspect myself that he will pull out. The Democrats obviously then have an open convention in Chicago. Who the hell emerges? I mean, I don't think anyone knows. You might say that Kamala Harris is the front runner, but it's by no means certain. But probability is that Trump will win. And maybe that explains why big business, not least Elon Musk, is donating large amounts to Trump. Sometimes, there is a debate in politics that, big business makes victories of one party or one particular presidential candidate or another. There's also, this is neither or, but there's also the argument, and I would make that argument at least in part in Britain, in terms of July the 4th, that big business chases a winner. It wants to donate money to the party or the candidate of the winner because it wants to ensure that when they're in office, they can make the phone call, it will be picked up, and they can have direct communications with those in power. So we have not only the Labour Party in Britain courting the city, we also had, of course, the city courting the Labour Party. And so, yeah, Elon Musk has donated, or at least announced that he's donating $45 million every month to the Trump campaign. And as I say, my expectation is that he's doing that not because he wants to make Trump the winner. I think Trump is already the winner, barring accidents. Accidents, of course, do happen. But he wants to actually influence the winner. And so, for example, and again, I didn't watch this one, in Trump's convention speech, apparently he attacked electric vehicles, and said they're too expensive. I think Elon Musk wants to influence not the future president, but the president that comes in January. Just a note, I think it's worthwhile making the point that from a Marxist point of view, we don't discount the role of individuals. We don't discount the role of accident. Clearly, that bullet could have hit Trump, not just in the ear, but in the middle of his head. It could have blown his head apart, and he would be an ex-presidential candidate, and everything would then be different. I mean, who would be your alternative other than Trump? Well, maybe because they announced, Vance as the vice presidential candidate, maybe it would be him. Who the hell knows? Either way, Marx basically stressed the bigger picture: classes, historical trends, modes of production. So in terms of what I've just been saying about being winner is not the result of some sophisticated Marxist analysis. It's worth as much as the punter who goes down the betting office and says, I think Trump will win. I mean, it's nothing more than that. I'm not claiming anything particularly profound in saying that. But in terms of just looking at the potential difference an individual can make, I think it's just worthwhile noting Zelensky, after the NATO summit, has a phone call, a long phone call apparently, with what I'll call tongue-in-cheek, the future president, Donald Trump. And Zelensky says that it was a very positive phone call. But I'm not the only person pointing it out. I'm getting this directly from journalists, that in terms of his address to the Ukrainian nation, as far as I know, Zelensky for the first time has talked about negotiations with Russia before Russian troops, Russian forces have withdrawn from Ukrainian soil. So there's talk from Zelensky of the next equivalent of the Swiss peace conference that they put on with not inviting Russia. The next one, there would be an invite to Russia. So I would argue, that clearly Trump would run things differently to Biden. And in spite of statements from Lamy and Keir Starmer that they will stay with Ukraine for as long as it takes, a Joe Biden phrase, if and when perhaps you get Trump back in the White House, that will change. But that does not mean that we should view Trump as the peace candidate, that it's automatically, sensibleness and diplomacy that suddenly breaks out. It takes two to tango, and it takes both sides to accept a deal. So it's up to Vladimir Putin to look what is on offer. Maybe some deal over the Crimea, maybe some deal involving joint sovereignty, who knows, in the Donbass, we just don't know. Maybe language rights of Russian speakers, again, we don't know. But also we should be aware that in spite of his clear margin of victory in the in his first presidential victory, Zelensky, I would argue, is certainly vulnerable to forces on the right. And we shouldn't discount the possibility that if Zelensky is going in for negotiations, maybe he's pushed in to negotiations with Russia, there is the possibility of forces to the right accusing him, for example, of being a national traitor, of selling out sacred Ukrainian interest to the Russian beast, or some other such phraseology. In other words, what I'm thinking of is the likes of the Azov Brigade, Azov Battalion, the Right Sector, and other such forces. We just don't know. All I would say is that the statements coming from Lamy, the statements coming from Starmer, should be treated with a pinch of salt. They will simply follow what the United States tells them to do. And if it's Biden, they will echo Biden. And if it's Trump, they will echo Trump. Britain doesn't have an independent foreign policy. And basically the same will go for Germany. The same will go for France. And it looks like Italy too. So yeah, individuals do make a difference, but not a fundamental difference. And I'll just add a couple of points here. That, of course, the main strategic aim of the United States, and from what I can gather, this unites both the Democrats and the Republicans, isn't simply doing down Russia. The main aim is China. China represents a full spectrum strategic challenge to the United States. And it's clear that both the main parties in the United States are determined to stop the rise of China. In terms of Russia, if anything, it's a side issue. That's certainly my take on Trump's approach to this question. And just one final note on Ukraine. Just note, last time I think I wrote on the Ukraine war, I did comment on the little enclave that Ukrainian forces had managed to gain on the eastern side of the Dnieper. Remember, their forces withdrew over this huge river. They abandoned the city that they'd captured. They pulled out in good order, and Ukrainian forces captured 3 villages. And I just recently read a report on that, that there's no way that it is going to be expanded. Ukrainian troops reportedly say that it's a suicide mission. Getting there, you know, they have crossed by night. Loads of them get killed. They can't evacuate. They're wounded. They're dying. They face 120,000 Russian troops. And it looks like, at the moment at least, the Russians are quite happy with them being there so they can pick them off. In other words, what I'm arguing is sort of what I've been arguing really since the Russian failure to capture Kiev. And that is what we're dealing with here is a war of attrition, a war where village falls here, a village falls there, but fundamentally nothing changes. And so although I read in you know, in the SWP and in the latest commentary by the SWP sort of intellectual leader, Alex Linos, the proxy war that's being conducted by NATO isn't going well. I have to say that if I was in NATO high command, if I was in Washington, if I was in, you know, the Pentagon, I would be looking at what's going on in Ukraine quite contentedly. Not one, you know, US soldier, not one German soldier, not one British soldier is being killed. Russia is bogged down in a war that it cannot win. It's spending a fortune on and is losing thousands of men and tons of equipment. I mean, tell me why things are going badly for NATO. Does anyone seriously think that Ukraine is going to push back the Russian army all the way to the borders of the Russian Federation? I think it's highly unlikely, not least with the lines of trenches and defenses that the Russian High Command have put in place along the entire front line and along the entire border, including in Crimea. So I think this is, yes, a war of attrition. And what will decide this war is high politics. What happens in Washington? What happens in Moscow? Perhaps a coup attempt in Kiev, but it's unlikely to be decided on the front line with the poor guys who are just dying day by day by day. Okay. Okay, let's move on to Israel stroke Palestine stroke Middle East. We had a Houthi drone attack on Tel Aviv, the former capital of Israel. It got through. It landed, it exploded, it killed 1 man, injured 10 others. I haven't read it, but I've seen it quoted. Houthi statement reads, this was a new whiz-bang missile. It got through because of its unique technological qualities. Israel, on the other side, says, whoops-a-daisy, it was human error. and we're looking into why this missile got through and why we didn't manage to shoot it down, either using fighter aircraft or using Patriot missiles or whatever else they normally use with such weapons. On the balance of probability, I suspect that Israelis are near truth on this one. I suspect that it's human error rather than Houthi technological prowess. So yes, the chances are this was an Iranian cruise missile. The Houthis might have added this or that, but it's an Israeli failure to stop rather than a Houthi technological advance. Nonetheless, if you take the BBC, it was, reassuring us only a few days ago that Israel itself wouldn't respond because it's a long way away, that it would rely on America, Britain, and whoever else has got ships, stationed off the coast of Yemen. They would respond instead. And initially, in terms of press reports, when the explosions start in Yemen, when this oil refinery blows up in flames, 100 deaths, the reports were of a joint action by the US, by Britain, by Israel. But as it turns out, as it seems at least at the moment, this was an operation by Israel. There's no reason to doubt that. Israel has the planes that can refuel midair. It has long range enough aircraft anyway to get there. It could attack Iran. I don't know what the distance is from Israel to Iran, but something of the same order. It attacked, and basically Netanyahu says, well, if you try it again, this is what you'll get, because previous attacks, they've been successful in shooting them down midair. This is the first time they've killed an Israeli citizen. And the basic message is, if you kill one of our people, we'll kill 100 of yours. I don't think that will actually stop the Houthis. The BBC and the nature of reporting would be anyway that you can't give the background to everything. But I suspect myself, the fact that they are such a focus of anger by Netanyahu and the Israeli government, this would something actually that would boost their standing domestically in Yemen. Remember, they are not the government. They control North Yemen, most of North Yemen. And we're not dealing now with two different states. Either way, this would boost their standing domestically, but also regionally. So from their point of view, 100 deaths is a price worth paying. We should also comment, I think, on the judgment, year in the making, that's my understanding, of the UN's International Court of Justice. This is by 15 judges. From my memory, this is a majority judgment. So it's 11-4, basically saying that Israel's occupation of Palestinian land, 67, not 48, 67, is illegal. And this isn't to do with settlements. This is just the occupation of the land. So we know that Israel not only took over the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, it also, because the Six-Day War in 1967 was a simultaneous war against Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. And Israeli forces also took over the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights has been annexed by Israel. And what's happened is that although Israeli settlers were removed from Gaza, there wasn't ever very many of them. The exact opposite has happened on the West Bank. What we've had is Jerusalem has been declared a single city instead of it being divided east and west. It was. It's now one city. It's the official capital of Israel. And of course, what's happened is that settlers have been planted in East Jerusalem and also on the West Bank. And just recently, we've had news of 5 more outposts being announced on the West Bank. I had to look up because we're not talking about police outposts or army outposts. We're talking about settlements. So Israel's colonial settlement program continues on the West Bank. And if we include East Jerusalem, the figure of settlers is something above 600,000 people. Anyway, what we're talking about with this judgment isn't settlement. It's actually the continued occupation of the land. Personally, I wouldn't have thought that particularly controversial, but this matters. It's not because it matters in Israel. It certainly doesn't matter to Netanyahu. Their government didn't even send along any lawyers to, make Israel's case. They just dismissed the judgment, as you would expect, by saying that, the judges were anti-Semites. And interestingly, for next week's Weekly Worker, they also said that we don't need the UN telling us what the land of Israel is. We have Genesis. We have the word of God. Now, I don't know whether Netanyahu is religious. He might, put on a show of being religious, but in his heart, is he really religious? Does he really believe that God, for example, made the world in 6 days and 6 nights, and on the 7th he had a rest? Does he really believe that? Does he really believe that Abraham was promised this land for his descendants? I don't know. I doubt it somehow. But next week we actually have an article by Moshe Machover basically looking at the use of the Bible when we're talking about, of course, the Old Testament, as some from a Christian background would call it, in terms of Zionism and how it uses the Bible to justify its colonialism. So from Netanyahu's point of view, he doesn't care what the UN says. He's putting God above the UN. But it does matter when it comes to US politics. It does matter when it comes to US public opinion. It does matter in Britain more than it matters in Israel. So although the judgment isn't binding, there's no one there that's going to enforce it, we shouldn't just dismiss it as mere air. It's somewhere in between. It has symbolic value, and again, we don't deny the role of symbolism in politics. Okay, and of course, what we got from David Lammy, what we got from Keir Starmer, and of course, what we'll get from Joe Biden when he recovers from COVID, is that what we're committed to is a 2-state solution. Well, when you've got 700,000 settlers, when you've got Israel turning around and saying, well, this is our land because God gave it to us, this is a piece of nonsense. And of course, the United States will not enforce any UN judgment on Israel. It will not stop the delivery of arms, will not stop diplomatic and financial support for Israel. That will continue. And therefore, what we will have de facto is a one state, a Zionist state. And then you've got the problem for Zionism. What are we going to do with these people? Are we going to give them a vote as they've got in Israel proper? No. There are too many Palestinians to make that a safe option. So what you've got to do is keep these people under military occupation, you've got to have an apartheid state, or you've got to get rid of these people. And you've either got to get rid of them by having a second Nakba and moving them over the other side of the Jordan, or moving them out of Gaza into the Sinai. You have the ultimate solution of letting them die, as is quite conceivable in Gaza, for example. Our own approach is that two states is delusional. The United States, the EU, no one is going to enforce that. Israel refuses to accept it. But we also say that you're not going to get justice. You're not going to get rapprochement between the Israeli nation, or Hebrew nation would be a more accurate description, and the Palestinian nation, with a one-state solution. I've already described the Zionist project for a one-state, but the project that the left puts forward is delusional, because it's based on the idea that you can win the Israeli Jewish population to accept one state, or force it upon them using arms. Well, look at the present situation, both on the West Bank and in Gaza, to see that the Palestinians clearly are incapable of doing that. They're in no position of where they're militarily superior to Israel. Israel is the regional superpower, and the only viable agency that, at least at the present time, the left could possibly conceive of to enforce such a settlement is something like a Muslim Brotherhood Egyptian government lined up with Hamas, lined up with their fellow thinkers in Jordan, Syria. But that wouldn't be democratic. That wouldn't be secular. That would be something of a reactionary nightmare. And what we can guarantee, I think, pretty safely, for example, just a bit of science fiction and magic the United States out of the formula, what we know under such circumstances is the majority of the Israeli population would fight, tooth and claw against such an outcome. And so what the left is proposing is forcing the Jewish Israeli population, the Hebrew nation, into unity. That's not a Marxist program. What we need to have for is a rapprochement between the two peoples, and not the only, but the most likely, the most viable candidate for that is really the sort of program that Moshe and his comrades were putting forward in the early 60s, of an Arab revolution led by the working class. It has to be said, here we're sitting in 2024, there's a lot less reason now to be optimistic about strategic perspective than there was in the 60s. Arab unity was a real living, much less so now, but nonetheless, some sort of regional solution. It's clear that there is common feeling in the Arab world for the Palestinian population. They view them as one of their own. But what we're proposing here is a wider regional solution, a solution where the working class takes the lead in the overthrow of the House of Saud, the Hashemite kingdom in Jordan, but crucially the overthrow of the army regime in Egypt. Egypt is by far the most important Arab country by far. Anyway, moving on. Just Stop Oil. 5 people have been sent down after a trial. 4 of them for 4 years. One of them, Roger Hallam, for 5 years. I think it's an outrageous amount of time. Also, and I think perhaps more concerning to me, is actually how the trial was conducted. And what we had is Judge Christopher Heller, or Heeler, Hehir, denying the right of the defense to put forward the political reasons why these five, clambered above the M25, the motorway around London, and why they disrupted traffic, wasn't it, for something like 3 days, caused an almighty traffic jam, and no doubt disrupted the wider London economy. They didn't have the right to put forward, well, it's global warming. It's us that are doing it. It's the motor car economy. It's the capitalist economy. It's production for the sake of, production. It's production for the sake of profit. Whatever their reasons were, the judge prevented them from doing a political defense. This is an increasing pattern with the judiciary. Now, there are people on this call that know much more about the law than I do, but this sort of right of jurists to hear the politics, the right of the defense to make a political defense, goes right back in terms of English history. And judges have actually, or at least one judge, for example, I've been told about, and I say on this webinar, know more about it than I do. There's been cases where a judge who stopped juries listening to the political reasons of why I did it have actually been hauled in front of the House of Commons and locked up in the jails of Parliament, for doing that. And I know from my experience with the CPGB, and I'm talking about this CPGB, with colleagues of ours who were involved in the solidarity movement with the Timex strikers. We had a whole factory that was closed down by this transnational up in Dundee in Scotland. They sacked the entire workforce. The majority of the workforce were women. Our comrades were going to go out and do slogans on Timex offices or whatever it happened to be near London. The police intercepted them and charged conspiracy. You can get 8 years for conspiracy. And the comrades put forward a political defense. There were 4 of them, and they explained to the jury why doing it. They weren't hooligans. They weren't, as the police charged them with, conspiring to burn down the offices of Timex. Apparently, the police came in with what they called a petrol can, was actually not petrol, but diesel. Either way, no, they weren't conspiring to burn down anything. They were intent on doing slogans in solidarity with the Timex strikers. We got down Timex strikers. We got down the convener. We had a very good barrister for us who put forward the politics of it. And I can remember being in the court, and much to our delight, the jury, not by majority verdict, but by 12 of them, said, well, of course they're guilty. That subtext, we know they've not denied what they were doing, but they pleaded innocent, and we're finding them innocent. Now that should have happened with these Just Say No to Just Stop Oil 5. They should have been allowed to put forward the politics. They should have been allowed to persuade this jury of 12 people that they were politically right to do what they were doing. Now, I can disagree with the tactics, but if I was on a jury, I would certainly find them innocent, because I would go, okay, I don't think that stopping the London traffic for 3 days is going to stop the system. And that's what they think they can do. And precisely my warning to the comrades, the 5 of them, and others in Just Stop Oil and Extinction Rebellion and other such, I would call it elitist operations is that there's a tendency to either be persuaded or persuade yourself to go for more and more extreme elitist actions. So, for example, I had to have a sort of small titter. I certainly got great sympathy for those activists that went to Madame Tussauds, and didn't they custard pie our future monarch and his queen, with I don't know what they made it with, but anyway, they custard pied their waxwork models. Look jolly good. But isn't there a tendency, with such actions, ultimately you end up with not symbolic actions, but why not do what the shooter attempted to do to Trump? Why not go in for individual assassination? Why not go in for a terrorist campaign? Well, I can tell you why you shouldn't do that, but I can also tell you why I think such elitist actions are also misguided, because what we need is to win majority opinion over to a program that basically can deliver you a system change. You're not going to get system change from protest politics. You can only get system change from revolutionary politics. And I think the only practical program to achieve that is organizing the working class into a mass communist party, not just in Britain, but in the United States, in China, in India, across Europe, and the working class coming to power on a global scale. Not necessarily all at once, but to me, that's the most practical, realistic, and humane strategy. It's more difficult. I mean, I admire, the heroism, the willingness to sacrifice themselves of these five. 5 years in prison, 4 years in prison. You have to admire these people. But is it going to achieve what they want it to achieve? And I don't think it will. It's not going to persuade the Prime Minister. It's not going to persuade the City of London to stop investing money in order to make more money. Capitalism relies on continuous expansion. And until we control capital and turn capital into our, back from alienated labor into labor that is under the control of the producers, the system of self-expansion, endless self-expansion, will continue. And therefore, human civilization, nature as it is at the present, will be in danger. So we could have a civilization collapse, mass extinction. Maybe it's already, maybe we're already in the midst of it. But that's what I would urge comrades in XR and in Just Stop Oil and other such campaigns to consider. Much more difficult, have to be much more patient, but nonetheless, we need a realistic strategy that goes beyond, as I said, protest politics. And of course, what's happening now on this particular front is that the authorities are imposing more and more restrictions on protests. This isn't going to be just confined to the Tories. This will be something that also our glorious new Home Secretary would also be minded to do. And no protest about this, these sentences from the former Director of Private Prosecutions, Sir Keir Starmer. Okay, what's the time? 10 minutes-ish to go, roughly aiming for an hour. So that's good timing. Again, talking about articles coming from coming in the Weekly Worker by authors, certainly on this particular subject, that know a great deal more about it than I do. And this is the Microsoft outage. I have to say that I experienced it. I was trying to bill to my, grasping landlord, and I wrote to them, I've tried X times today to get my bank to pay it. I can't manage it. I'm going to give it one more go to pay a damn bill. And then it worked. Nonetheless, my next door neighbor outside my door here, she went off to Croatia, where her family is, and she's still there. I don't know whether it was Gatwick or Heathrow. Either way, her flight was cancelled, and you just everybody about going into the co-op, having to pay by cash, whatever. Only 8.5 million computers were affected by this, I'm told, but clearly it had a system-wide impact. So millions of people have been affected by flights. This was Britain's bigger, away day, biggest flights of the year. It's the end of school term. It's when everyone goes off to Spain, Greece, wherever the hell they go to. This was the day that they do it. So huge numbers of people were affected in Britain, let alone globally. So I just wanted to comment on the wider picture here. Now we know we know what Microsoft says, nothing to do with us. This was, what do they call it? CrowdStrike, a subsidiary company that was doing an upgrade. They didn't coordinate when they were upgrading with Microsoft. It is Microsoft, isn't it? There's no getting from it. We were using Microsoft systems. My bank was, the airports are, the supermarkets were, most people, most companies seem to use Microsoft. There is an argument, and I've certainly heard it, that the job of socialism, for example, would simply be to come along to a company like Microsoft. There we are, we've come to power on a global scale. We can't nationalize it because we're not the nation, but you get the idea. We socialize it. I remember coming across the argument in a similar way back in the day when the COVID pandemic started. And I can remember myself being I greatly admired Oxford University and the researchers there in cooperation with AstraZeneca for getting their drug up and running and out into the arms of people like myself. I had no hesitation myself in queuing up and getting my jab and all the boosters that I've had. But I was also glad that a lot of other companies, either because of government contracts or for whatever reason, were also developing their own particular approach and their own particular drug when it came to COVID. Because we know when it came to the AstraZeneca, there was a small if you had this or you had that, there was an enhanced risk that you could die, for example. There were radically different approaches in terms of, the live virus versus the dead using RNA and all stuff beyond me. But I was glad that we had a multiple approach. And I remember having an argument, with this is waste. This is a waste of resources. That no, what we want is one drug. And my own approach is exactly the opposite. My own approach is precisely with Microsoft, is that there's a danger of the world relying on one program. Now, I'm told by academics, by people, in physics, in mathematics, people in computers, they say we have nothing to do with Microsoft. It costs money. It's full of bugs. This isn't the best system. Linux is the best system. And again, this is beyond my pay grade, but Linux is for free. The Linux developed by the users themselves. You have lots of different Linuxes for different reasons. But my basic approach would be let 1,000 flowers bloom. And that's what is stopped by the likes of Microsoft. So Microsoft goes around buying up potential competitors. It puts out its program along with the computers. It wants to get you hooked to this program, and it actually stifles innovation. So it pretends to be innovating, company, but it actually isn't. And so I'd simply say this, that in terms of at least my vision of socialism, while we want compatibility here, we don't want different computer systems that can't talk to each other, that you have half the world on one system and you can't communicate with the other half of the world on another system. That no, what you want is creativity. What you want is many different approaches to solving problems. So we want loads of different enterprise looking in how you combat malaria, how you combat COVID, how you can fight cancer. We don't want nationalized or one socialized drug company that's operating in X center or whatever. No, you want many, and you want to use human creativity to come from different angles to this particular problem. So far from that being irrational, it's something that is rational and something that we should seek to encourage, and something actually that monopolization works against. So we are the champions of, to use a phrase, enterprise. I would say innovation, not the big multinationals such as Microsoft. Just one other thought, again coming at it from a very different angle, and that's just the idea that you came across, and maybe you do, on some sections of the left, talking about the law of value. And when it comes to Microsoft and their computer programs, you used to get a floppy disk, and you bung it in your computer, and that would cost, I don't know what, a few pennies if you produce millions and millions and millions of them. Nowadays, you just do it over the internet. What's that cost? Pennies? Fractions of a penny. It's cost the electricity, which you don't count because you do computers on. But what this illustrates to me, this outage, this CrowdStrike, fiasco that we've seen, is actually that's not true. That we all know that when it comes to our phone devices, I thought I'd switched it off. When it comes to our phone devices, every once in a while you get update, and it takes what, half an hour, sometimes an hour to download it. When it comes to your computer, my God, my computer isn't starting in the usual way. Why? Because it's chonking, downloading some update that's either allowing the computer to deal with new possibilities in terms of games or films or whatever the hell it happens to be. Sometimes it's about guarding against malware or trojans or hacking operations of one sort or another. But the point I'm making here is, just like your water supply, your computer program is like a public utility, and it takes maintenance and repair that adds value to it, because it isn't just a question of some disembodied computer program that's being updated by another computer program. Behind the keyboard, there would be thousands of programmers that are responsible for putting in thousands of labor hours into those programs. Although these programs don't have any sort of material existence, you can't throw them up in the air, you can't weigh them. Nonetheless, when it comes to value, they most certainly do have value. And just like our water system, like I live in London, Thames Water, which is massively in debt because they banked up debt on the basis of borrowing, on the basis basically ripping off their customers and then selling it to Chinese banks and whoever the mugs were that brought the damn concern. What we get in London is leaks, and what we get is polluted rivers, i.e. the River Thames, and shit coming out of drains and going in the river and going in to the seas that surround us. And of course, Thames is the worst example. It's the biggest water company in Britain, but it's by no stretch of the imagination unique. And the fact of the matter is that everything in life, needs repair. Everything needs maintenance. We're told, and there's a truth to it, terrible truth, that we live in a throwaway society. I think that we should be against the throwaway society. We should definitely be in the repair and maintenance society. So yeah, we are in the culture. If your computer breaks, chuck it away. If your cooker breaks, chuck it away. We're not in that stage yet, thank God, when it comes to cars, when it comes to houses. But almost, note, I'm going to finish on this, the Labour government's approach to housing is to build new houses. What about the houses that are empty? What about the houses that need repair? What about the houses that need upgrading? What about the houses that don't have central heating? What about houses that have damp? What about the houses that, leak heat in the winter? What about upgrading them and making them habitable? It doesn't seem to occur. We are in the culture of new. But as I've argued, in reality, we do need repair. We do need maintenance. There is value in these things. And I mean in the Marxist sense. That's it, Bob. Thank you very much. So, 1 minute.
Yeah. Perfect timing. Thank you, Jack. You'll be pleased to know that the sound quality was generally very good throughout, and you did improve your video did improve throughout. Just before I bring Tina in, she's already put her hand up. Just to remind, I know it's gone in the chat, but if comrades do want to make a contribution, could you raise your hand? And then we'll make you into panelists so that you can speak.